Welcome to the eComm Collab Club podcast, where operators, risk takers, and battle-tested founders drop the lessons that cost them time, money, and their sanity, and share what actually works so you don't have to pay the same price. Hosted by Peter Gardner and Adam Pearce, founders of the eComm Collab Club and Blend Commerce, the Shopify CRO agency, and proudly sponsored by OmniSend. Email and SMS marketing so good, it's boring.
All right, look, you've polished the homepage. It's glittering. Your brand voice could charm the queen, and your ads are sharp and a butcher's nice. Yet your orders are still vanishing faster than a pint at closing time. Now, friends, this is friction. And it's those tiny gut punches in your funnel that make your shoppers mutter, sod this, and leg it until they get paid. Now, what we're doing today is we're bringing someone to you who is a former pro swimmer, now hydration head honcho, Joe Welstead from Oshun. And he's bootstrapped his brand by hunting down those micro annoyances and drop kicking them into the sea. Now, if your checkout is clunkier than dial-up modem, now grab a brew, fresh page in the notebook, because by the end of this hour, your funnel won't look so much flow as flood. Now, guys, this is the eComm Collab Club podcast, and let's crack on. Cheers.
Joe, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks, Peter. It's going great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. Joe, for anybody that hasn't yet stalked you on LinkedIn, who are you? What keeps you up at night? And how did a former pro elite swimmer end up bootstrapping a D2C brand?
My name is Joe Welstead. I am a former pro swimmer. But in the meantime, I actually had a supplement brand that I launched in 2016. It was sold in 2022. And this was kind of like the background and what really triggered my interest in the sort of wellness space, especially after being a pro athlete where everything is like performance. So you're always looking at how to make yourself feel better, perform better, and so on. So I always had that little interest. Then I had a supplement brand. And basically I learned so much during those 6 years that after that, I moved into the media production world, and it was great. Got to do some really cool things. Worked with like Aston Martin, National Geographic, really cool brands, the North Face. But I always had this kind of little like inkling that I had like so many learnings during those 6 years of running Motion Nutrition. And then during Nojak Media was our production company. While running that, we also ended up working with a lot of startups, especially in the sort of CPG, drinks, food and beverage space, wellness space. And basically Jack, my co-founder, and I realized that although we were shooting content for these brands, inevitably it was like they needed way more than content. So like, you know, you'd ask like, well, who are we talking to? Who's your customer? How do you want this to look? How does the brand feel? And often they didn't really have an answer. So our work kind of became quite strategic, even if we weren't necessarily paid for that, just because we wanted to do a good job. And Jack and I eventually, after a couple of years, were like, we're probably better at that stuff than actually, and this is a lot more fun than doing the actual production work. And I had been interested in the hydration space for a while, and I kind of noticed that it was going through a bit of like a 2015 like protein like moment. If you remember, like 2015, 16, 17, like protein suddenly became like a mainstream thing. It went from bodybuilding and performance sport to everybody should be having more protein, and like the awareness of it was growing and growing. Whether or not you're buying protein powders is almost irrelevant. Everybody started to know that you needed more protein. And over the last year or two, I think hydration has really gone through the same thing, and it's still going through this. Like people are working out that, maybe I'm drinking either not enough water or only plain water, and it's not really hydrating me enough. And it's sort of gone from this like endurance niche rather than bodybuilding niche. It's gone from like, Ironman and triathlon and marathon space to actually like, oh, this is going to help me feel better every day. So this is kind of like why we landed on Oshun and how we launched it. So now it's literally been 14 months since we've launched. So it's been a really good time.
Awesome. So I
didn't answer your question about what keeps me out at night. So honestly, right now, I have a 6-month-old baby who's still co-sleeping. So that's what keeps me up at night. But this is the difference now, like having gone through those 6 years, we're doing things so differently that I have no like major stresses from my business that keep me up at night. So this is like my biggest achievement right now is like we have a business that's doing well enough that it's not keeping me up at night in any way.
That's awesome. So it's letting you actually focus and be that new dad as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's a lovely luxury to have, mate. Well, congrats on that.
Thanks.
So, any learnings? Obviously, you were a pro swimmer. Any learnings from being a pro swimmer, pro athlete, to now being a business mogul running your new businesses, mate?
Yes. When you're an athlete, or I think when you do anything at a certain level, whether it's sport or probably any kind of art, any kind of music, any kind of activity, that like to get better, it's extremely repetitive. And it's basically the same thing over and over and over again, and like looking for tiny 1% improvements every day, every week. And ultimately that's boring. And this is, I think, what people don't necessarily realize when they haven't found the business, is that they look at it and think like, all they see is the marketing, right? So it's like even the personal like sort of brand marketing as much as the product marketing is like, oh, that looks sexy and fun. And even if you look at athletes, like you think, oh, their lives look amazing, like especially like big celebrities like football players, rugby players, tennis players, it looks super sexy, right? But ultimately their life is boring as F. They sleep, they train, they eat, recover, perform, compete, and that's it. And then they go like do like photo shoots and stuff. I think that's the really like the biggest parallel, is like to be really good at what you do, there's going to be a lot of repetition, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I love that you say that. It's boring. It is. You've got to be boring. And I think from when we look at CRO, we always say, look at Kaizen. It's at 1% better every day. It's just doing that one thing that gets you a bit better, and making sure to get there. So I love that you've learned that lesson from sport and brought that over to business.
Definitely.
Yeah, man.
And I think, Joe, I want to talk about, obviously, today some different topics around, obviously, something we mentioned that bit at the start there about kind of friction on site. Thinking about sort of, I guess, sort of hidden conversion blockers, so to speak. Think about obviously what's happened in the past 40 months, or even actually with the previous business with these supplements. Has there ever kind of been a time you've said, look, we've found out something on site, almost kind of like a silent issue, that was sort of quietly killing conversions?
I think there have been maybe a couple times, but I maybe like backtrack a little bit and give you my sort of broader take on this stuff. Because I think all of this is really downstream from having like a desirable product and brand. And it's easy to kind of forget that. I think if you have a really desirable product with a fantastic brand and an appealing offering, so like this looks like good value for money for me. And I'm not saying it's cheap. I'm saying I'm happy to pay this money for this product or service because it's appealing to me. I think the value's there. If you have those things, like basically all the conversion stuff is downstream. It's just an extension of that brand communication and the whole marketing and the whole funnel. So today, like if you're running a Shopify store and you haven't done anything like super funky with it, the chances are you're like in the 95th percentile of like highly converting platforms. Like you're probably set up really good already. And of course, like if you do something odd, that might really mess up the numbers. Or if you have, you use strange language or strange visuals, that might mess up the results. But ultimately, if you have something desirable and you haven't messed anything up bad, like it should work. So I would ask, like, if you haven't got good results, like at least like decent results before you do any really like specific CRO work, maybe like take a look at like a very honest look at your product and brand and offering, and just make sure that that's actually valid before looking at the specifics.
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of this building blocks thing, isn't it? And I think, I put a post out actually, I think it was today on LinkedIn, about saying that, sometimes when I meet e-commerce managers, sometimes the core element of that business is broken, in the sense of, look, they can't get the damn product out to the customer. And ultimately, if those architectural things, like say the brand, the product, the actual fulfillment side of it, are not ready, there's no point even looking at the site from that conversion perspective, because even if you do try and solve it, I guess you're still going to be then hitting a brick wall if you can't get those basic things right, or even not get to that point first.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing we've done with Oshun is it took us about 8 months to switch from default like one-time purchase to default subscription, and that was like obviously a massive blocker to results. And like ever since we switched that in like early December, results on the subscription sign up have been like phenomenal, really, really good. I've probably gone from about single-digit percentage, as in like, you know, maybe 5 out of every 100 customers signing up to subscription to about 40%.
Wow.
So that's been a pretty big shift.
And were you nervous at all about switching sort of subscriptions in the sense of, look, you know, worrying about, look, are people ordering too much, too little, managing that differently to kind of, I guess, a single purchase? Because the psychology about buying subscription versus single purchase, I guess, is different. Were you concerned about that at all?
One of the reasons we waited so long, and like in hindsight, I probably would have done the switch earlier, but it was valid to wait because we basically needed like really good validation, really good social proof, and like a pool of customers that really believed in it and that would then immediately be happy to switch to subscription because if they're already buying it and it's like they get a better deal, they don't have to worry about anything. Like that's great. I'm not a big believer in like forcing customers into subscriptions or making it the default option or not getting them to feel comfortable with the brand or product before kind of shoving it into a subscription, shoving them into a subscription. Like, I think you got to be careful and respectful of your customers.
Yeah. So I love that you guys did that way around. So many brands that have a subscription product that don't yet have that social proof, that don't yet have people converting just for that first purchase, are trying to go over that subscription model first, and they're going, and it's just such a big blocker for somebody that doesn't yet know your brand. They don't see positive reviews on site. They don't know if they can trust you. They're not going to convert for that big subscription model. They're going to go and try and default to just a single purchase. And I love the fact that you took that and you went, no, we're not doing this. Let's do this later once we've built up that social proof and once we've got a loyal customer following and done that. And I think that's what a lot of brands actually get wrong when they do launch subscriptions, if they launch it when they first launch their business.
And people have been burnt, you know, like people have been through the subscriptions where there's like black hat tactics and they can't get out of it. They get really frustrated. So there's a lot of baggage on that too.
On the subscriptions, Joe, I mean, look, I mentioned to you obviously just before we got on air that my wife had just recently purchased from you. And I suppose, look, if I think about my wife, she's someone that is curious about using products like yours and is curious about how electrolytes can help. I suppose you have different types of customers in terms of that. Okay, they're starting on the journey. You've got customers that maybe have used kind of, you know, electrolytes from a sport and recovery perspective before. And you've got other people that are kind of coming at more from an overall health perspective. Do you have to kind of give different information or handle those people differently in the subscription process?
Yeah, it is a tricky thing. The first thing that you would notice if you look at the Drink Ocean website is that we have been very conscious to not talk about sport or exercise anywhere. Like the furthest we go is maybe talking about yoga and Pilates. Like there is no mention of like, you know, sweating it out on a football pitch or running a marathon. Like, and we don't want to be at those events. We don't want to be associated with it because that mental link is so strong already between electrolytes or hydration in general and sport. We don't have to make it. Like 99% of our customers have already made it in their mind. Like we don't need to make that connection for them. Like they know it already. So we'd rather focus on the other stuff that they maybe don't know. So for example, if you have a good electrolyte balance, your skin is going to be healthier. You're probably going to have less greasy skin, actually. You're going to have less sebum production because your skin has got a proper level of cellular hydration. You're going to have less brain fog. You might have like more regular stools. All these things that people don't necessarily know about electrolytes, this is what we want to talk about. And then, yeah, we do have some pretty unique segments. There's that sort of beauty wellness angle, and then there's pregnancy and breastfeeding is a big segment for us and quite unique. And so, yeah, we have to kind of manage those things a little bit differently. But ultimately, when you talk about feeling well, the overlap is pretty good. You know, because we're not talking about exercise performance, it's quite liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Joe, Could you tell us about a time, it might be now with what you guys are doing at Oshun, but it might have been one of the previous places or brands that you worked with, where there was a design tweak or something that looked very smart on paper, but in theory, when you guys implemented it, it hurt your guys' performance?
Yeah, I don't know about hurting a performance, but we tried to launch a loyalty scheme with Oshun, and we implemented it well. Like, it looked nice and everything, but it didn't really work, just in terms of number of signups, and people were maybe a little bit confused about it. I think that there's two things that were happening there. One is that it's quite hard when you have a one product brand to justify a loyalty scheme. Like, it just seems like a lot of effort for the customer for maybe not that much reward.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that we were probably just too early. I don't think we had enough like hardcore hardcore fans yet to justify that. So I probably I'd do it again, but I'm just waiting a little bit so that we have a much bigger audience and we can be a bit more targeted with maybe who we present it to.
Yeah. Can we dig a little bit deeper into what you guys did there? You obviously have got subscriptions. So how are you balancing the loyalty with subscriptions?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that, like, in terms of information to the customer, like, we need to be a little bit careful not to overload people. Already, like, for people to manage their subscriptions on their own, and go in and like edit dates or unit number or whatever is not always that easy. So when you start adding another layer to that, you can confuse people pretty easily. But the good thing is that we're on Skio now as their subscription platform. And so it is actually really easy comparatively to other apps to log into your account, check what's going on, and then add a discount code. If you've sent a referral link to somebody and you got a discount code, like, you can add it to your next renewal. And this is like the most common, I think, frustration is if you have people on a subscription and you give them a loyalty link and they get a coupon that they then need to place a new order for, and that just doesn't, that just, it's like a middle finger to your customer. Like, it doesn't make sense. And if you tell them that they have to cancel and do a new one, like, just forget about it. It's not a good experience.
Yeah. No, 100% agree with you. I think you almost need to somehow bake that into the subscription model, or only ever offer to somebody that's not on the subscription model. Like, probably something more like every 6 orders then free, or 20% off, or whatever it is that you're offering, making sure that you're not confusing those two. But I think that's a classic case of in terms of friction there, you've nailed the paradox of choice with having that implemented as well, and making people think more about which option is going to be best. So yeah, lesson learned there from your side. It's a nice one for other people to listen to, I suppose. Other than that, was there anything else that flopped elsewhere that you had tried?
In my previous CPG brand at Motion Nutrition, we did a launch for a new product, and we sort of hyped it up probably way too much, and sort of gamified it a little bit. The execution was good, but the product itself was it was basically like a piece of merch, and it wasn't worth the execution. So I think, like, the lesson there for me was, like, if you're going to hype something up, the product needs to match that level of hype. And this applies to, like, any level, I think, of a business. So with Oshun, for example, we decided to have, like, a super clean aesthetic, very different format, very different delivery method, something that was going to catch a lot of people's attention, just by being in a pump bottle, by having, like, a lot of white space, being, like, almost beauty led with the colorways and the words that we choose. Like, if you kind of place yourself at that level, you better make sure that the product is at that level too. I think that now that the execution part of making things look good is probably easier than it's ever been. It's not necessarily simple to have a product that matches that level of expectation, because you can hype things up like crazy now. But if you don't have a product that matches that hype, maybe you're going to get a ton of first-time purchases, but then your renewal rate is going to be terrible. So that's the lesson I learned there, is, like, if you're gonna make something look incredible and really ask people for their time and attention, you better make sure that it's worth their investment, whether it's money or time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Joe. Sorry, Pete, I've cut into you there, which is what we warned Joe that we would do. So I was just going to ask, thinking about obviously your market here, and you mentioned it earlier on. We talked about beauty, we talked about wellness, we talked about female wellness, we talked about sport. What I'm interested in is when you're thinking about the user experience on the site, are you leaning towards, I guess, the look, feel, user experience of a particular industry to give inspiration? Or are you trying to say, look, we're trying to kind of create this category as it is by itself? I'm just kind of wondering, do you tend to take more inspiration or lean towards a particular way of doing things, knowing that you've got these different streams of customers coming in?
Not so much now that we have our brand identity kind of established. But before we launched, like I was actually super vocal about this. Like we posted on LinkedIn and Twitter and pretty much everywhere saying we were going to build this brand. We didn't have a name for it. We didn't have any packaging for it yet. But the way that I described it to get people's attention was we're going to build the Aesop of electrolytes. And I wanted to build the most beautiful electrolyte brand in the world. Like that, this is what I said. So like that can give you a really good idea of what sort of space we're thinking. Basically, like turning this product that was like a sort of a very like pinpointed product, like as in like use case product. Electrolytes usually would be like taken a couple times a week by people who go for a workout, and making it an everyday household item that also happens to look really good. And you're probably going to be keeping it out in your kitchen, and it's hopefully looks interesting enough that people will pick it up if they come and visit, or you're going to show it to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I think you guys win as well, because I guess the traditional experience of electrolytes would have been more that kind of medicinal type look, sports type look, and you've completely moved away from that, which I think, like I say, it generates that interest. And we talked about the subscriptions a minute ago too. What I was interested in is when we think about kind of when you start with just singular purchases, what is the sort of difference between the journey for a repeat buyer versus, say, for a first timer in terms of what you do in terms of communication, experience, all that good stuff?
Definitely the messaging needs to change a little bit from, hey, this is what you can expect from us, to this is what happens when you take it all the time, like, and you carry on taking it. So we need to educate people a little bit, maybe manage the expectations sometimes, and just keep guiding them towards like, this is why this is a good idea to keep using it. And then of course you can do things like, the sort of life cycle time, you can send an email with an express checkout, or like, we use like occasionally, this is not part of our flow, but we can use a direct link to a subscription checkout. I find that a little bit aggressive. I think that it's important for people to understand what they're doing. You don't want to get people to subscribe without realizing they're subscribing. But yeah, essentially it's the messaging that changes a little bit from this is why you should try this product to this is why you should keep using this product.
Because I was going to say on this front, we actually had the guys from El Sarah, who are a female wellness brand who basically provides supplements for women, and it helps them with their sort of female health and kind of being more regular with their period and all that kind of stuff. The one thing that I remember that they said is that they had initially, when they started, this issue where customers are coming back a month in and saying, look, this thing isn't working for me. And what they said, look, you need at least 90 days to be able to actually, make sure that this is going to give you the benefits you want. Is it the same situation with Oshun in terms of there's a particular period of time you need to then start seeing tangible benefits? And do you kind of communicate that quite strongly? Or is it something that is kind of, not as strong in terms of your messaging?
Yeah. So one of the, if somebody places their first order, one of the email flows that they'll get, we try to keep things like one email is one piece of information. So again, it's just like easy to digest. We don't, try as much as possible not to confuse people, because there is so much we could talk about. We're trying to just make it extremely simple and easy to digest. But one of those touch points basically says, this is what happens immediately. This is what happens after a week. This is what happens after 2 weeks. And this is what happens like with ongoing use. And so just like framing people's perception and expectations and like, I find it also helpful to kind of get people to look out for these things. Because if you're somebody who is extremely busy, who maybe doesn't pay that much attention to what they eat or drink, who has good days and bad days all the time, you can easily have a series of like 5 or 6 good days in a row and not really realize why. So I think it's helpful to just nudge people towards like paying attention to this stuff. Because then if the earlier they can link it to our product, the better for us, of course.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, on that note, in terms of getting people to the kind of the next purchase along, is there anything that you think that you guys have done, whether in terms of particular message in an email or SMS or on-site messaging, that has kind of or nudges people well towards that second purchase?
I think there's kind of 2 different waves of benefits to our product. The first is that if you have sort of brain fog or you have a hard time getting clarity of mind, usually if you have electrolytes, and like that's going to be the first improvement, is like you actually feel mentally more clear. So this is like we talk about clear mind and clear skin as the 2 things that we kind of promise people, and the clear mind kind of comes first and the clear skin kind of kicks in a little bit later. So this is just really helpful to get people to look out for those things, because if you can initially feel mentally better, but then eventually feel yourself looking better, that's like a completely different like emotional kind of benefit. I think getting people to feel better is arguably the better benefit in my perspective, in my opinion. But getting people to look better and to feel like they're looking better is probably emotionally what's going to get people to purchase again.
Sure.
So it's like I would prefer to focus on getting people to feel better, but ultimately, like if they feel better and more confident in front of the mirror, like if they think they look better, if their skin is more clear, if they're getting like, we've had incredible reviews from people saying like after a week, like their colleagues are saying, "Oh, what have you changed? Like your skin looks incredible." Like that kind of feeling is like deeply emotionally rooted. And if that's associated with our product, like incredible, because that I think is a bigger pull towards purchasing again than the mental clarity one. Even though I wish it was the other way around, but if somebody like looks better and is getting more compliments, even if it's just aesthetic, that is like a very strong emotional pull.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, on that note with reviews, what's your kind of tactic, Joe, for reviews? Because I think this is something I think that we have tried to tackle with lots of brands over the years, is that when do you ask the review? Are you asking for product review? Are you asking for company review? Do you kind of have a particular time frame that you operate within to then try and elicit those reviews?
Yeah, of course, we're one product brand, so like the product or brand kind of end up being at this point anyway pretty much synonymous. But yeah, we wait I think 2 weeks. So even post delivery, you should have had the product for maybe 10 days or so. Even so, if you're abroad, then the delay is going to be longer, just to accommodate for a longer shipping time. But we want people to have experienced it for a couple of weeks really before putting the review, because then you should be seeing both sort of mental and aesthetic benefits from it.
Sure.
And then you get a reminder like another week later or something. But we just try to take people with as much respect as possible. Like asking them twice I think is okay. We don't want to like harass people or anything like that. And ultimately, if you've seen the 2 emails and you haven't reviewed, you probably don't have that much nice stuff to say. So like, it's okay. We're not going to go chasing you.
Sure. Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? And I think the other thing as well is, so in terms of where do you actually ship to?
Pretty much. I mean, I can't say globally, but we do most of our business in the UK, but we ship it to the US, Canada, and across the EU and to the UAE now.
And do you find that the kind of response and the reviews that you get are different in those different markets, or is it generally the kind of the same sort of feedback that you get?
Good question. I think that the difference with the US is they're probably more aware of this of electrolytes in general, and the way that we sell there, it's more linked to like filtering your water at home and then remineralizing it. So I don't think that's necessarily a demographic thing. It's just more of like by design, we're getting more feedback that concerns that. But honestly, the feedback is generally pretty consistent. It's either, wow, I had migraines and brain fog and now it's all gone, or it's my skin is looking so much better. And ideally it's both. Because that's the ideal thing, is it's both. And in fact, we got a review, I think this morning, which was like just 10 out of 10. It ticked all the boxes. And so they had both those types of benefits, but also they took the time to explain. First, I had it with tap water and I didn't love it. And then I went to see the comments and reviews and saw that people were suggesting using a filter. And so then I used filtered water and added Oshun, and it tastes incredible. So this is perfect because it's like it goes through the whole customer process of like, that sort of aha moment. Now I love it. Can't go without it. And I get all these benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you.
I love that. I love the fact that you are, one, keeping track of your reviews like that you know exactly what's come in and analyzing from that point. I think this is such a lost opportunity for so many brands that don't actually go and look at those reviews and actually go and understand exactly what their customers saying, not only on their own site, but going to their competitors and reading their competitors' reviews and analyzing those and figuring out what they're not getting right. I think it was Rory Sutherland. Yeah, definitely was Rory Sutherland. I saw a little short of him speaking about this the other day, where there was a restaurant owner that his restaurant wasn't in the top 50, I think, in New York. And what he did is he got different staff members to go to all the other restaurants and go and enjoy the experience. So all the other like top restaurants in the city, but don't come back and tell me about all the good experiences. Tell me about the things that were underwhelming. And then what that guy did was he went and collected all the underwhelming feedback and he focused specifically on the underwhelming feedback to make his own restaurant better by tackling those things that were underwhelming, because his thoughts were, those people had a great experience. It's a great restaurant, but they're sitting with this feeling of like, that was underwhelming. And that's the reason why they ended up not liking that restaurant, not going back. And that's why he made sure he nailed that. And that's ultimately what put his restaurant top.
Yep.
And I think, it's the same thing with D2C brands. It's awesome to hear that that's what you guys are doing. What else? I mean, you must be looking at these very often, and are you using those on site to break those friction points and the objections?
Yeah, I personally love looking at this stuff, both the good reviews and occasionally, like every brand, we get some negative reviews. The negative reviews I find, although it's frustrating, is probably the most helpful to work out what you need to improve. And I'd say like 9 out of 10 times somebody's complaining about the taste. And so Oshun is an unflavored electrolyte solution. Yeah. So you add it to water, you add it to any drink. It's essentially got a salty profile, right? Because it's electrolytes. So of course it's going to make your drink a little bit salty. But what happens is if you have it in just straight tap water and you live in, let's say, like a UK city, like especially a Southern England city, like you live in London, you live in Bath, you live in Bristol, your tap water is high in chlorine. And if you add, it's basically like making a margarita. Like if you add salt, whatever flavor is in your drink is going to come out stronger, right? So if your drink has got a high chlorine flavor that you may have got used to on its own, but now you're making it come out stronger because your drink is a little bit salty, then you're going to taste the chlorine so much more. And then we get the heat for that, of course, which is fair enough. Like they don't, if people don't know what's happening, like I understand it completely. But this is where we need to be sure to educate people that if that's the case, A, you should probably be filtering your water anyway. And B, it's going to make your water taste incredible. Essentially, if you filter your water and then add Oshun, in terms of a flavor and mouthfeel, I'd say the closest description I can give it is like drinking Evian. And you know, if you drink Evian, it's got like that slightly silky mouthfeel.
So almost like milky kind of
exactly.
texture. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Those are the minerals. So what the minerals makes it like milky. Unfortunately, it's not a great selling word. Like it's not a super sexy like marketing word saying it makes your water taste milky. But that is the mouthfeel is those minerals, and it makes sense, right? Milk is high in calcium and minerals, so it's a similar kind of mouthfeel.
So have you found your first complementary product that you're going to sell? You're going to sell filters with the orders as well?
It's a hard sell, because obviously, like, filters takes a whole lot more decision, and you want to consider that carefully. It's not a hard sell this way around. But the other way around makes a lot more sense. So we actually partner with a reverse osmosis brand in the US called Sans, and they have a fantastic product. And like, as an upsell to them, they sell a product that's $400. So adding in a product that costs about $40, that's going to remineralize your water to an extent that's much greater than you'd have in just regular mineral water. That's a really sensible upsell.
Yeah. Let's continue with the review side of things. Are you pulling some of those reviews out and placing them strategically within your copy? Are you using them on your marketing? How are you getting across that social proof and using your customer's tone of voice to actually sell your products?
Yeah, we use them a lot in all kinds of different placements. With advertising content, I try and really narrow things down and boil down to the essence of what you're trying to say. So rarely would I take a whole review and just paste it on an ad. But invariably you can basically boil it down to a couple of words from what that customer said. And that's I think where it's a little bit magic, especially when it's things I'm getting compliments on my skin now, or this kind of thing, just really, really short and kind of hits an emotion that's for me the best thing, because it's not us saying it, it's our customers saying it, but we're just filtering what information we give you and just making it very, very easy to grasp in an instant.
Yeah. And then obviously the topic of this podcast is friction. So one of those friction points is then educating your customers if they've already been educated, and that sort of feels like a step back in the journey. When you guys are doing your ads and getting your message across with these pain points, are you directing people to specific landing pages? Are you trying to get them slightly along in the user journey? Or are you still just, using... Do you have such a product that it's still important that they go through that whole user journey? What do you guys find is best for you?
We have a couple of landing pages, one in particular for that essentially mother care segment that I mentioned earlier, because that is quite specific. They're looking for maybe they have different pain points, so they're looking for different kind of benefits to what a regular user would look for. So that's I want to make sure that they understand that we're addressing those pain points and that our product is not only safe but also beneficial for that. So that's quite unique. For pretty much everybody else, we go straight to the product page, and it's a case of basically choosing what information we want to share with them. And yes, there's education, yes, there's re-education, but also there's overwhelm and a mental load. And so, we're always trying to balance these things and figuring out what is the most important bit of information that people need to see, on landing and then below the fold and that kind of thing. And just try to keep it to that minimum. And then even with the purchasing journey, it's kind of the same. It's if you look at our product page, there's the silly example, but there's no quantity selector. You have to add to cart, and then once you have the cart slide out, you can choose if you want multiple. But just trying to separate those decisions, I think, is really helpful. I really am aware of mental load and the fact that it's not a nice thing to dump a load of mental load on your customer. And you have to just, again, respect their time. And so hopefully what happens is you first land on our product page or on our homepage or on our landing page, and immediately, if this is not for you, then I'd rather you just bounce straight away. I don't want to trick you into staying if it's not for you, because it's not respectful of you and there's no benefit to us. So I'd rather you were very clear about what it is you're seeing on the page. And if it's not for you, you go. If it's for you, okay, now I want to read more and more, and until the point where you're satisfied and you decide if you want to make a purchase or not. But I'd rather kind of separate those steps out a little bit and make it easy for people to work out at any point if it's highly relevant for them, or if they should just go away.
Yeah, I love how you say, you're treating even your non-customers, you're treating your visitors right. And, just by giving that decency to them, but you also then, it allows you that ability to speak directly to who your target market is. And, ultimately, those are the people that you want to be there. And you don't want those other people. There's no point in trying to trick them, because if you are, you're probably going to lose the people you do want.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of fast fashion brands or things like that could probably learn a lot of lessons from that. Trying to get the right customers in.
You can use a lot of black hat tactics and kind of more or less deceit, but ultimately that's not going to give you a customer that you want to keep, or that they want to keep giving money to you. So what's the point?
Do you sell stuff online? Then you need OmniSend. Yes, that OmniSend. The powerful yet refreshingly intuitive email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 on average for every dollar spent. Like watching steady lines go up and up and up? Just automate your email and SMS campaigns with OmniSend. Set it up once, then sit back and watch the sales roll in while you snooze. You're still awake? Then go to omnisend.com/ECC. Give OmniSend a try and start getting sales so steady they'll definitely put you to sleep. Don't forget to use code ECC30 for a 30% discount.
Joe, let's talk now about the post-purchase experience side of things. And if you think about brands dropping the ball after checkout, do you think there are any areas where people do this? And I guess equally as well, are there any times where you think, look, Oshun have maybe slipped up on this as well?
The one thing that we do immediately post-purchase, when you're still on the checkout page, on the sort of thank you page, is it's a nice little feature that JudgeMe have. So we use JudgeMe for our reviews, and they have this super simple feature, which is not a full-on referral scheme, but it's just a post-purchase little referral link. So if maybe the ideal scenario for this is like, if this is your second or third purchase, and you're probably going to tell your friends about it, or you're thinking like, oh, this would be good for Jennifer or whoever, my sister, my mother, my wife, like whoever you're thinking about. If right then and there we're giving you the chance to send them a referral link where they get some money off and then you get your money off your next order, I think that's just a super easy, simple thing to do. It's not necessarily going to be used loads, but also there's no loss there. It's a really simple place to use that feature. And then further along post-purchase, the tricky thing to me to get right is how much education to give people before they receive their order, especially when it's their first order. Because when it's their first order, there are quite a few things we want to tell people. But you don't want to feel like you're being spammed before you've even received your delivery. So that's a tricky thing to get right, because we want you to know all this stuff before you even use it for the first time. But we also don't want you to feel like we're now going to email you every day for the rest of your life. That's not a good experience. It's not a good feeling.
Because I guess it's difficult, isn't it? Because ultimately, while you've got a physical product, you are more, I guess, selling a service or a process that people are going through to feel better, look better. And I guess, like you say, it's that how do you then kind of drip feed that information to stop the overwhelm, but equally then not get people going, well, look, actually, we're 2 steps into the process, we're going to stop. I think the other thing on this as well is with the post-purchase side of things, do you think there's any situations where you've done things that you think, look, that really has locked in people? Or do you see anything else in the market you're like, look, we'd love to try this thing in the future as part of our post-purchase experience?
In the future, certainly, we've got a couple of products that we're going to introduce eventually. So post-purchase cross-sell, I think, is going to be super interesting, and upsell, especially if you can. One of those products is going to be I wouldn't really call it merch, but it's like an add-on to our existing product, and it's not going to be an expensive product. So I think that'll be a really nice impulse purchase or impulse ad within however long, 60 seconds or whatever of your purchase, if you haven't added it in before.
Mm.
That I'm really curious about that. See how that works out. And I've been sort of I'm a little bit impatient to have 1 or 2 additional products where we can start experimenting with that. Even though it's beautifully simple having a single product brand, I've really enjoyed that so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to actually ask you a question here, but Steve Willicott has actually jumped in. We are going to do the Q&A in a set, but I'd rather kind of put this for Steve to sort of ask the question, because this is similar to what I was going to ask you. And what he said is, as you guys know, I'm big in pack and first order unboxing experience. You mentioned the benefits of the products and how they show over time. Do you put any welcome info, explain the process and what will happen over time?
Great question. We don't have anything like that at the moment, and this is sort of linked to the sort of whole like offering. People who have a subscription product brand are really big on this idea of the offering, where your first delivery arrives with like all kinds of extra gifts or goodies. Personally, I'm not a big believer in that. I think that you should be a little bit careful with how much free stuff you give away. This isn't a direct answer, but it's something that I feel quite strongly about. I think that if you start saying that, a serving spoon is worth £25 and you're getting it for free, this is not respectful of your customer. You're taking them for a ride. No little serving spoon that you're giving for free is worth £25. So I'm cautious about that stuff. It's a great question, and we could probably do a little better. We have a fair amount of information on the pack, so the product comes in this box like this, and then inside you have the bottle, which initially comes with a screw top, and then you add the pump inside. So it gives us quite a lot of real estate, I suppose, to talk about the product and what you can expect from it.
Yeah, sure.
The sort of stuff is, we're selling a health supplement. We're not selling a medicinal product. So as much as I'd love to say, like, with the utmost clarity exactly what you're going to benefit from, there's things we are allowed and things that we're not allowed to say just because of health claims and approved health claims. So especially with things that are on paper and on packaging, you have to be like extra careful with that. I wish I could say more because the benefits are very obvious, but if you're treading on health claims, you have to be really careful.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, it's a tricky thing to get right, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking about obviously what you described today as well, and I guess what you mentioned before about the people that are in kind of hard water areas, high chlorine areas as well. There's a couple of companies out there, one of which is Penny Black, and what they do is you can have kind of personalized inserts in there, a QR code, and that then takes you to a set of videos. So maybe that's something that could be of interest later, is that if you have a QR code that takes you a video, it's like, okay, here are 3 different ways that you can use Oshun, and in that you could then maybe show them the different ways of mixing it with obviously your bottled water, your filtered water. Maybe you can use it obviously in smoothies or drinks, wherever it might be. So maybe something like that could be a route that you could look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a good idea.
Yeah, I noticed that you've got recipes on site. You could always package those up and actually do a book and send that with them as well. But
Yeah,
I'm gonna recommend that you actually talk to Steve, who put that question to you. And I'm sure, Steve, you don't hate me for offering you to have a call, but Steve is brilliant at this side of things. I don't know if you're very familiar with what he's doing, but I'm sure you'll be happy to have a chat and spitball some ideas with you on this as well.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate that, Steve. Thanks.
I love how I've just volunteered him to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm thanking him on your behalf.
Okay. I've stalked. I said at the start, if people haven't stalked you yet, I've stalked your LinkedIn, and you preach negotiate everything. Could you give us an example of where you've saved some serious cash by doing this?
I think the most obvious space where suppliers sort of put their price and it's like hard coded, and this is like SaaS companies. So essentially, if you're new to eComm and you're like, you're sort of assessing all the SaaS options and all your sort of tech stack and trying to pull a bundle together, and you're like, shit, I'm not even started, and I've got like £1,200 a month of fees. Talk to each of those companies in person and see what you can do on the price, because they're very good at making it look like, no, this is the price for this is the price for that, and this is the price for like enterprise, and like there's no movement on that. That's not true. There's always movement. and you can bounce one off the other. And what they'll probably do is not give you a discounted price for life, but like they'll probably very happily give you a discounted price for your first 6 or 12 months. And that's ultimately what early stage startups probably need the most, is like, okay, like give me some breathing room so that I can actually start using your app and your features. And then once that's actually making me more money, then I don't mind paying you more because, it's working for us. But I think that's just a very simple and sensible negotiation to have. And most SaaS suppliers should be happy to have that.
Joe, on that front, is there anything that you spent on early doors of Oshun that you wish you hadn't as a founder?
I'll be honest, we spent very little money in terms of like, especially in terms of advice. Like we were extremely driven to make this profitable from day one. So we closed our first year end of March as a profitable business, which is to me like a really fantastic achievement in year one. So we were like really, really careful with how we spent our money. And I sort of view things generally like as, is this money going to be like service or is it going to be performance? Because this is kind of like where you can separate, your sort of expenditure across those lines pretty easily. And pretty much anything that was service, if it wasn't like critical to the business, we just didn't spend the money. So of course we have a 3PL because none of us want to be in a warehouse packing boxes. So like that's a critical service. But then everything else we basically just worked out ourselves. And if ideally we've done it before and we have some experience and we can execute well on that. But even if we hadn't, we basically said, well, if we have a limited amount of money, we're going to make sure that money goes towards performance and actually distributing our product and our ads to people rather than advisory services.
Thank you. No, that's good to know. And I guess on the flip side of that as well, then, is there anything that you wish you had spent money on that you didn't?
That's a tough question, to be honest. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about that. Maybe there's things like that unboxing experience. Maybe there's things where we should have spent a little bit more to kind of guide our customers a little bit more. So that could be one thing. And by the way, I'm not saying that companies shouldn't have services that they pay for. I think that it's just in the very early instances, unless you got a load of cash in the bank, you probably want to make sure you've got a structurally sound business before you start paying for advisory services.
Yeah. Sage advice. No, thank you.
I love how Rich and Steve are having a nice little conversation with themselves there. All right. Should we move into some of the questions that we've had from the audience? So I think you've just touched on this as well. So do you use the 3PL? If so, how important was finding the right partner? If not, what influenced this decision?
Yeah, so from the first day with this company, we've used a company called WonderPack for our fulfillment. And they've been fantastic because they have they have multiple sites, and they have one site which I think David would be okay with me saying it's essentially their sort of incubator site. So what they're very much set up to do is scale up and down quickly, because of course with an early stage company selling D2C, it's very hard to have like reliable forecasts on your volume. So essentially their whole setup there is to be able to take big spikes. For example, in September, we were super early in our growth. We'd only just started running paid media. And Trini Woodall posted about us as a product that she loves to her 3 million followers or something. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, you can imagine for a really early stage startup that isn't really running ads yet, that was really, really big spike in orders on that day, and then the following couple of days.
Organic as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So fantastic experience, but we needed to have a 3PL that can handle those big spikes. So they did super well. So very happy with them.
Excellent.
Cool. The next one we've got there is: have you considered 3D and AI for e-commerce?
So I'm guessing Andre is talking about like generative AI and that kind of thing.
I'm presuming from the ad front, maybe.
Yes. We've actually used some renders, some animated renders, which we've been super fortunate with, essentially like UGC. So we had some animated renders as UGC, by an incredible artist who did this content for us as like support as a friend. So that was incredible. Because of our background in content production, we basically leverage our skills on that front as much as possible. So Jack, my business partner, is essentially by trade a photographer, and he's picked up video production specifically for Oshun. But basically, we've like leveraged as much as possible what our skills are. He's fantastic at creating visuals. I'm quite good at the words that attach to that. So we want to leverage that as something that makes us stand out. And so far, from the generative AI stuff that I've seen or played around with, I haven't seen anything that is anywhere near as good as what we can produce, or any reason to use that ahead of using our own skills. So maybe that'll change at some point. But for now, I think because we've got a unique format, unique brand, unique positioning, I just really want to lean into that. And as soon as you start adding in AI, you are by default like leveling yourself a little bit, because you're pulling from existing data, right, and existing assets that are in the market, whereas we want to be creating new stuff all the time.
Awesome. Rich Evans, with reviews, do you just go for product reviews, or do you go for service brand level reviews first?
We just do product reviews. Personally, I find it really annoying when you buy a product and somebody asks you for a review for the experience. I think that's just really shitty to do. So no, we wait till the person's had time to use it and ask them for their experience on the product.
Okay. Adam, have I missed any down here?
I think we've got them all through, which is great.
All right, we've got a couple more there for you just before we get off. Biggest e-commerce myth you'd kill right now?
Right now, this generative AI idea that you can create dozens and dozens of pieces of content and wonderful assets that are going to make everything work better. Right now, I don't believe in that at all. And I think that you can create a whole lot of very average content at scale and at speed. And I'm not sure that's going to give you a head start on anything.
Yeah, it's more quantity over quality. And is that really giving you the benefit, especially of like what you say, treat your customers better? Do you think it'll get there?
It's certainly getting better and better. I don't know if it's going to get to the point where, what you really need is to create something new that gets people's attention. If you're recycling existing stuff, that always makes it a little bit harder. And I think that the more stuff there is, the harder it becomes to really pierce through. And so if everybody's creating loads and loads and loads of average or even good Gen AI stuff, the bar for what gets noticed just gets higher and higher, right? So I think like a very smart creative person who is able to understand like culturally what's going on and create something that is going to trigger a response in whatever emotional way they're trying to do it is always going to be ahead of like the masses of content that's being produced, because that bar is just going to get higher and higher. So it's going to be interesting, but people who are extremely skilled and extremely creative and can really understand cultural nuance and things like that, I think they're going to be probably hard to find, but in a really good place to create good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's mixing AI still with human is still going to be the leveler, because you've got to bring your unique skills with that to be able to do it. And
Right.
I think that's what a lot of people are probably getting wrong with AI. They're going, okay, we're going to use AI, but then they just use AI.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the execution part
is
yes, so the execution part is definitely going to like be more and more valid. But it's the ideation part that I think that this is where, like, as humans, we need to be good at that. Because if you can come up with a fantastic idea, and the execution a couple of years ago would have been super hard, but you're then able to create a prompt that executes on your idea, that's going to be really, really good.
Yeah. You've almost got to just still spend the same amount of time doing this thing, but spend more time on that idea and you know, with AI, the prompting, the fine tuning, and then just get that grunt work of actually execution, like you say, get that done in that last little time frame. Whereas I think historically what's happened is that first part is terribly short and should never be that short, and the other part is terribly long and shouldn't be that long and tedious. We've just, because more and more people, like you say, this what's AI keep on generating? The sea of sameness. I see that saying come up along these, and like you say, the sea of sameness. But I think that's what's happening as well. You've got to, you can't be same but slightly different. You've got to be extremely different. Cool. I think we got time for one more over here, and this is what I actually really wanted to ask you. I know we touched on this pre, but I don't think anybody else heard you say it. So I'd love you to tell everybody else what you think as well. Tougher gig, prosumer or founder?
100% prosumer. 100%. A tougher gig, yeah, it's way harder because it's physically and mentally absolutely draining, and your whole life becomes consumed by this. And I know that you might say that the same can be said as a founder, but when you're a pro athlete, swimming is what I know about, you're not only all consumed, but you're also entirely effed. Like, you don't have any energy for anything else. You don't want to do anything else. Everything is looked at through this prism of like sport and performance. So it's like, yeah, every single thing has to go through that performance outlook. And so, yeah, it's really difficult. Founder is not necessarily easier, but I think it's a simpler gig.
Yeah. Are you enjoying the world outside of swimming now?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I tell you what, actually, it's been 10 years since I quit competitive swimming, and I'm now really enjoying swimming again, like once or twice a week. But I needed a really long break from it to be able to enjoy it again.
Yeah. Are you ever tempted, like when you're just swimming casually, to race the guy next to you, just as a, you know, like, I can prove that I can beat this guy?
I don't know. I can't let anybody be faster than me in the public pool. Like, I have to be faster than everybody in the pool on the day.
I love it. Old habits die hard, eh?
It leaves his casual swim exhausted.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Joe, well, look, thank you so much for joining us today. Look, and it's great. Obviously, you shared so much with us, and it's just that sort of brutal honesty, which is great. And obviously looking at some of the specific things you've done. And I just wanted to say, like, if obviously listeners want to find out more about you, obviously find out more about Drink Ocean, what should they do? Where should they go?
Joe Welstead on LinkedIn or Twitter. Definitely come and talk to me, ask me anything you like. And drinkocean.co is our website. That's Oshun, O-S-H-U-N. So drinkocean.co.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining us today. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Please do like and share.
Thanks for listening to the eComm Collab Club podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join our community at ecommcollabclub.com/community.